right, hello everybody. Welcome to our panel on big things coming in AI, big intellectual questions in AI. We have a whole bunch of amazing folks here. Ideally, we'll get through a lot of material. I am your moderator. I'm Nick Thompson. I'm CEO of The Atlantic. Starting from our left, we have Cody Coleman. He is the CEO of CoActive. We have David Robinson. He works on safety systems at OpenAI, which is not a boring job. We have Yohannes. He is the president of AI Data Lab at Zeta. He was on this panel last year, and he did so well. You go watch it. He got a job offer as he walked off stage, I believe, and has been hired ever since. So the other three candidates, don't think of this as a panel. Think of this as a great opportunity. Fareed Adib, he runs Vista Equity. First question for Fareed, okay? There's a general perception in AI that it's kind of great for consumers. Like, it's really cool. We all use it. I hope you all use it. Probably everybody here uses it. It's great. But like for companies, it's going a little slow. We all read that MIT study. I was at a panel the other day with like 100 CEOs. I said, raise your hand if AI has had a positive effect on your P&L. Not one hand went up. You have, what did you say, 82 companies that you own and $100 billion, 89, right? And they're all AI companies. So I'm guessing you think that adoption in the enterprise is coming pretty soon. What is it that needs to happen for enterprise adoption to match consumer adoption? Let's start there, and then we'll go from there.
Well, Nick, it's a great question. I mean, I think, first of all, there's a lot of noise and hype, and maybe just to break it down with some numbers. So we're relatively in a very, this is the very beginning of the first inning, right, of a very long story. And so we have to just put this in perspective that we've only been with Gen AI capabilities for only like the last 3 years. And they're maturing at what we would call not even an exponential rate, but a logarithmic rate. Something like we've never seen before in technology. I mean, it took us 15 years to get the PC distributed. It took us another 10 years to 15 years to get to the internet, and then another 10 to 15 to get to mobile. So when you look at it in the great scheme of technology evolution, we've only been with this technology for a very short time, but it's had such a massive impact, and now it's being used by billions of people all around the world. Now, when you look at it, consumer-driven behaviors always are usually the very first use cases, whether you're looking at any of these previous technology evolutions that we've looked at. Businesses always tend to be a little bit behind that curve because, one, there's a lot of reasons. I mean, when you're looking at generative AI systems for consumers, today if you want to book a restaurant and you're booking an Italian restaurant and you show up to the reservation and it's a Thai restaurant, there is some level sort of like flexibility or user experience that I think you could probably put up with, right? You'd be very disappointed.
Well, but unless it's an amazing Thai restaurant.
Unless it's an amazing Thai restaurant. But when you're looking at generative AI in the business world, we are seeing in our portfolio of 89 companies that touch 750 million users, that every company is leaning in to using Gen AI. Now, it's beyond just the use case of using chat within the enterprise. We're talking about deploying agentic systems, which is sort of the big buzz phrase of the day, which is using autonomy and using the ability to have these sort of micro workers that go into the workforce and really help drive businesses to be more efficient and more effective. Now, with that, when you really take a look at it, a lot of that gets driven by businesses actually unlocking their data. There's only 1% of businesses today that are leveraged within LLMs today, within the large language models. What we believe is that as companies start to drive more adoption, they start to implement a lot of these agentic systems, you're going to see that unlock trillions of dollars of additional revenue.
So the thing that needs to happen is for companies to get better at unlocking their proprietary data. Actually, Cody, that's a good question for you, since that's your job. Is that the step that needs to happen for businesses to really start using this stuff?
These businesses need to think about the entire life cycle of their data, their content, in order to actually realize the value from AI. I think a lot of organizations, they adopt point solutions, which will give you a little boost in productivity. But actually, when we think about executives, you need to almost think about adopting AI and the change management around it as you would M&A. Because effectively for these businesses, they need to re-architect their organizations, their workflows, around adopting this new digital workforce that's going to actually impact multiple steps along their supply chains, along their workflows, in order to actually be able to realize that value and ultimately re-architect their business to actually drive.
That's an amazing metaphor. So like implementing AI is like acquiring a company and integrating it into your systems.
Yeah.
With like a bunch of grumpy employees who are upset that they didn't, their options didn't vest and things like that.
Yeah, it's a big thing. It's a big change management piece. Like every single, and the human element of it, being able to actually see that.
That's one of my top 10 metaphors of the year in AI. Thank you very much, Cody Coleman. This panel has already been sufficient. David, can we talk about one of the things that you've worked on, which relates to a little bit of what Cody was talking on, which is hallucinations, which is a huge problem in integration. Like, so when you integrate and you have these M&A acquisitions or you use new tools, you don't want to be sent to the Thai restaurant when you want to go to the Italian restaurant. This is part of your work and research.
It is, yeah. I was involved in a research project recently. You could think about sort of what's happening now is people start with things that are sort of the most resilient. Like sometimes, for example, iterating on creative is an easy place to start, but there's so much more that these systems can do when we can count on them to get things right. And so that is a sprint for our research. And one of the things that we found with hallucinations, which are one of the key issues to figure out, is that when we train these systems, we want them to give the right answer. And so we have these sort of tests that we give, and they learn over time how to give the right answer. But one of the things that we realized recently is if you reward right answers and that's all you do in the scoring, it's a little bit like a standardized test where kids might learn that if they don't know the answer, they might as well guess because they might get points for a lucky guess. And so there was a research piece on this quite recently, is if you penalize incorrect answers, then it's better to say you don't know when you don't know than to make a wrong guess. And so this is part of the reason why, if you look, and this is, we publish these detailed kind of results about how it's going, and hallucinations are much lower in GPT-5 than they were in earlier models.
Can I ask a question about this? Because this paper is amazing, right? And it's like so blindingly obvious, right? The way we evaluate AIs teaches them to BS, so they BS. You're a Rhodes Scholar. Like everybody in this panel is like super high IQ, all these incredible degrees. Why did nobody think of this for 3 years?
I think that...
I mean, thankfully you did, but like, why did it take so long? It's like, I love experiments and findings where it's like blindingly obvious when it comes out, but no one saw it.
Well, I think one of the things that had happened was we were thinking about hallucinations as a separate problem. For example, we would have evaluations for, whether it's polite or not, or these other things, and then evaluations for whether it's hallucinating or not. But what we realized is that this problem is systematic, and so it actually changes how we grade potentially over time, all of our evals, and not just the ones, dedicated separate ones about hallucination. But like a lot of insights, it's obvious in hindsight. I actually had this conversation with the researcher. I was like, didn't we kind of already know this? And the answer was, well, we kind of did, but we weren't as systematic about really implementing this. And now, both at OpenAI and across the field, it's been a shift.
Nate, you want to add something to that?
Yeah, I think, well, first of all, Nicholas is correct. Last year, I was speaking on behalf of Meta Platform, and we replaced the M with a Z, and here I am today.
You just turn it around. You get confused. You showed up at the wrong building one day. You had your glasses
and certainly, when I was at Meta, I was working on Llama. We were fine-tuning the models, both pre-training, taking a bunch of what we call world knowledge, the internet, training the model, and then on top of that, making it more specific to a specific use case. So I worked on ads Llama, so advertisement, recommendations, large language models to figure out how we can generate meaningful alpha. And in terms of the, when you're building models, you have the evaluation, and you have these data sets, and you have a lot of human reviews, people in a room seeing if the model output was accurately reflected the human intent. The key word is human. Humans, we make mistakes. We're early in the AI journey, and humans have a hard time admitting when they're wrong, and the systems reflect that. And so in many instances, you have the technical the technical challenges of these really complex systems where even if you try, your darn hardest, there's still going to be, we're early in the AI journey, there's still going to be some moments of hallucination. And on the other front of it is, working in these enterprises. Again, humans are involved in the process, and there may be disagreements, and those just the nature of some of the product outputs that tend to happen. So, that's where we start to see such a simply obvious question or intuition, but it's not so obvious once you're in the machine, once you're in the kitchen. I think, David, you could certainly attest to that as well. In addition to that, OpenAI has 3,500 people, and think about how many daily active users, and so a lot more users than humans in the kitchen as well. And so, certainly going to continue to refine on that.
Fried, can I ask you about how organizations are going to change? It's one of the big topics I'm hearing a lot about as well. And there's a sort of a hypothesis that many organizations are going to get flatter, right? The product managers are going to know a little bit of engineering, and the engineers are going to know a little bit of product, and the designers are going to know a little bit of everything. And so eventually it's all just going to be flat. Are you seeing that? Do you agree or disagree with that hypothesis?
Yeah, I mean, I think we all think we're experts at everything, right? Especially now with ChatGPT.
You're an expert at a lot, and you've got.
Yeah, I just get on ChatGPT. I think I'm a doctor and a chemist and everything else, right? So I think that the reality is that, look, there's a lot of hype. I think what I would recommend to people here is that at the end of the day, Nate said it right. People run organizations. Yeah. There is a change management aspect to this. The number one thing that I think most people need to do and most organizations do, and this sounds counterintuitive to what most people would say, is leaning into this technology, is really making sure that you're driving adoption, because these are very early innings. We've seen this in other evolutions. There has to be a learning phase for the employee, and that fact is that if you're not using these tools, if you're not using these systems, you're not going to be able to learn. They're not also not going to be able to learn. This is sort of the cognitive layer that I think.
Totally lean in as an individual.
Yeah.
I can't imagine an argument against that. But as an organization, couldn't I take your argument that we're in the first inning and just say, hey, be a fast follower, relax, let your competitors mess around with this stuff, see what works?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that that's going to be very healthy for any organization, because when you're really looking at this, the fundamental fact is that I'll use an example. But by last time, this point last year, a lot of people were saying we would be getting rid of developers because of vibe coding. Vibe coding was going to get rid of developers. Well, what we're finding is that actually didn't happen, right? Most organizations haven't gotten rid of developers because although the code gen tools make developers more productive, you're not seeing huge organizations get rid of swaths of developers. So I think that the reality is that there's a fact around this, and I think that the other folks on this panel can convey this, is that there has to be a level of efficacy to the tools that you're using that have to deliver on this promise. And in the business world, it's much different than the consumer world. You have to have that level of efficacy that can match what a human can do in that same role. And so this flattening of organizations and getting rid of people, it could eventually happen, and it will happen in certain roles. We're seeing it in call centers. We're seeing it in areas where there's a lot of sort of transactional rote type activity. Even in people's daily jobs, a lot of the rote activity of workflows of switching between different ad tech systems and MarTech systems and moving between those things will go away. Those things will probably get supplanted. But the actual fact of getting rid of full swaths of people or flattening organizations, that change management is actually happening a little bit slower than people actually can imagine.
There's a really interesting IDC study which ranked all the possible use cases for AI, asked tons of business executives, and cutting costs was actually what came in last. Nobody is actually succeeding in cutting costs right now with AI.
But we should all. I also want to be empathetic to the recent college graduates. Although there hasn't been a meaningful slash in current employment, if you look at software engineers who are graduating college today, there's a meaningful slowdown in hiring that new. That is a stipulated fact.
Yeah.
And so we want to be mindful that. Certainly, when we think about the world of vibe coding, I'm going to be very consistent. We're in the earliest innings of certainly the most transformative technology that humans have ever seen before. And what we're seeing is perhaps the entry-level jobs being able to augment that role.
Yeah.
That's one aspect of it, as well as in terms of the current systems of these enterprises that have been building code on top of code, and the tech debt and the complexities of the current systems. It's going to be much more difficult to scale augmented code in a large, stable enterprise. But the companies are graduating from YC. This cohort, was talking to a founder. They anticipate building the business from the ground up, leveraging a lot of augmented coding tools, and they anticipate hiring less humans than before. So I certainly want to be mindful of the recent college graduates, which I'm certainly empathetic and hopefully.
Cody, do you disagree?
Well, I think I want to add on to that. I think one of the things that's been slow for enterprises to adopt AI is because there's a shortage of talent, of people that actually really truly know how to leverage AI, all the kind of things that you have to do in order to actually make it productive, to be able to cross that last mile of customization to get to that accuracy, to get to the performance that you need. When I think about it, 5 years ago, I was doing my PhD in computer science at Stanford. It's crazy to think that community of people caring about AI was incredibly small. We were all basically locked in a laboratory trying to scream to the world, care about AI. Now, it's kind of happened that we've had this massive, huge demand for AI in the past 2.5, 3 years because of ChatGPT, but we don't have the supply of people that actually really understand AI. If I think about my PhD, it took me 5 years to understand AI and become an expert in it. From a societal standpoint, we're 2 years into that. I didn't know what I was doing when I was 2 years into my PhD. So when you imagine these enterprises trying to adopt it, it takes time for them to get the talent and to adopt people. And I think actually new college grads actually have an advantage here because they can actually play around with the technology from the very beginning. But organizations need to also kind of realize that value and bring that into their organization so that they can think about it natively.
Yeah, just to add, let me just give you some statistics, because we study this stuff a lot and try to break through the hype, is that if you look at the top line of revenue that's being generated by generative AI, not the picks and shovels of how much is the trillions of dollars that are being spent on building data centers and chipsets. When you look at the core usage of it, $60 billion in revenue is what you're really currently seeing in the market. It's not actually it's not that much, right? The whole software industry, when you look at B2B and enterprise software, is $1 trillion industry.
Right.
So it's actually relatively small. The number one use case is actually chat, right? It's enterprise chat licenses, it's people using chat in the environment. Number two, guess what that is? It's code gen. The long tail of number three is all these small little solutions, but none of them have scale yet. So what does that tell you? That tells you that enterprises are slower to adopt right now, okay? So when you follow the numbers aren't quite translating to what you're hearing in the press and in your sort of vocation, what people are saying about the demise of human beings.
Is fully, completely accurate, not talking about the demise. We just talk about interesting research papers like hallucinations.
But what I would say is that the potential opportunity that we're seeing is that when you look at the $1 trillion software industry, there's all kinds of studies that say that the generative AI industry for the enterprise will be a $3 trillion industry. That's on top of the trillion that's already being generated. So when you follow the numbers, there's all this augmented capability that's going to be delivered by AI to the worker that doesn't exist today because of the sort of shortcomings that we've had of the technology of the past.
Yeah, that makes sense. Actually, David, can I ask you another question, though? I want to move to a related but slightly different topic. You solved hallucinations, or you didn't solve. You made some progress on hallucinations. Thank you. What is the next thing you want to, if you could solve another problem in AI, if your research team could be like, you know what? We figured out the trade-off between personalization and privacy. We figured out memory. What is the thing you're trying to fix that would make it better for everybody?
So I think, when you look at the impact of the technology, one way you can look at it is what's the revenue that generative AI is generating. But I think that part of what is so exciting is that the impact on business can be a lot per dollar spent on having this kind of tool. I mean, I think so. One of the things that people said when I first joined that's becoming more and more true is English is the programming language. And what that means is our whole idea about how software happens, that you have a team of developers that go off for months and have well-defined requirements and then build against those, that's changing. And long before there are no more, or fewer of whichever job, there's going to be much more software. That's what's changing first. Is it's much easier for people to create. You saw some of this at Dev Day where we were introducing visual systems that let people set up agents to do what they need them to do and also to prove and verify that things are working the way that people want them to be working. I mean, so evaluation and testing in the pipeline of what you want. I mean, that is, I think, one of the most exciting directions, because what it means is that instead of having this kind of cloistered group of experts who can build this stuff, we're moving toward a world where anyone can build what they need. And the thing is, sure, you might not be a developer, but you know what you need better than some, expert in building stuff is going to know what you need. And the last thing I'll say kind of about how I think this sort of, what's the skill? To your point earlier, why not let somebody else go first and innovate and then my business will be a fast follow? That I think has in it this tacit belief that there's going to be a new equilibrium soon of here's how this is impacting our industry and here's what the sort of new balance looks like. And I think the reality is that, as Fareed was saying, that the pace of change is durably much, much faster. And so, I think one of the skills that is so important and that does advantage the new arrivers in these various markets is asking, okay, is there a new and better way of doing what I need to do? That used to be a question we would ask like at the beginning of a career or the beginning of a business, like is there a new approach to this? Now it's a question you should probably ask every 90 days, and that's a totally different kind of environment.
All right, so this leads to a nice question for you, Nate, which is, all right, so everything's changing every 90 days, you're turning it upside down, you're doing totally different systems, we're all experimenting, we're all going nuts. How do we deal with governance in that world? Like, how do you have rules that like catch up if you turn the whole thing upside down every 90 days?
Yeah, well, I think a few things. First, you want to stay principled on the core mission. That should not change every 90 days.
Right.
Certainly, the key jobs to be done, at Zeta, we went from David Steinberg, our chairman and CEO, to our incoming interns. We think about the core jobs to be done, which are helping marketers and adjacent industries solve some of the most challenging problems. And certainly, my commercial break, we announced Athena. Certainly that's one aspect to really meaningfully advance the marketer's journey in driving the most ROI. In regards to what I deem as probably the three strongest moats for a business is people, data, and chips. I mean, in this AI race. And on the macro level, energy, but that's something that the country has to solve collectively as well. But I've always said from a very long time that when you're building out really great defensible software, trust pays interest. And I will repeat that over again, trust pays interest. In building out systems that are both transparent, safety built in the design, to make sure that we meaningfully follow the regulations of the country that we're serving, but at the same time, to certainly empower the user to make sure that this tool is to advance their journey. And in the space of data, that is certainly one of the key moats of any business, and we want to make sure that we treat that with the highest level of care and treatment. So we will always, Zeta leads on trust, and we'll continue to build that within.
So maybe this segues to Cody. This big question. I sort of threw it out there a few minutes ago when I was talking about big topics. But like for marketers, it's great to do personalization. It's great to have like all this data. It's great if you're a company to pull like all this private data that nobody has. It gives you an advantage. But every time you do that, you create some risk, right? We take all the company that we have that hasn't been scraped by the web, but a lot of it probably shouldn't be fed into a model for training. How do you balance personalization and optimization of personalization with not completely screwing up on privacy?
Yeah, this is a great question. I mean, it's a combination of, thinking about the basics in terms of data privacy, data security, as well as also just good design, being modular. This is something that we work with our customers on, where we allow them to define like their taxonomy, their core IP, separate from the foundation model, so that they can provide that context on top of it. And that modularity, it decouples the base foundation model from like the end outcome and the kind of domain-specific knowledge of that company. That then allows them to be able to actually quickly try out new models as they come out to see how that's going to impact and be able to do comparisons, A/B tests, to see actually is this driving things forward or are we actually regressing in a way that's detrimental to the business. And by thinking about this full workflow, and being able to activate this content flywheel where you can manage, monetize, and measure your content, that doing all three pieces, including the measurement piece, that allows you to be able to actually deploy these models safely, realize the outcomes, define the outcomes that you care about, and then continue to adapt with the change that happens, day in, day out.
All right, 50 seconds. Why don't you guys each give me one word to one sentence on what you hope most happens in the next year, or most hope happens in the next year in AI? Like a problem you solve or a thing that goes forward. Fareed. You can also say that the bubble doesn't burst.
Medical breakthroughs.
That is good. That's what everybody says is going to happen. Nate.
But that wasn't one word. But I guess
Just one sentence, one word. Don't be semantic.
Okay. Well, this is one of my best friends, so I could say that. I would say model efficiency.
That's a good one.
My word is bicycle, as in the famous quote of bicycle for the mind, right? More people are going to find out that they can build.
Right.
That's what I'm excited about.
Cody?
Yeah, and building on that, democratization, allowing people to actually play around and actually work with AI so that we can actually build a better future together.
All right. We got to get on our bicycles and get off stage. Thank you so much.
Awesome.